Welcome to another episode of the Build and Scale Boldly podcast. I am so excited to have my friend and physician entrepreneur, Dr. Bonnie Koo, joining us today. She is well known to many of you, but in case you've never met her, she's a master certified life coach, physician, and founder of Wealthy Mom MD. She's a money coach for women physicians. She's a proud graduate of Barnard College, Columbia University's College of Physician and Surgeons. And she's the host of the Wealthy Mom MD podcast, author of Defining Wealth for Women. And as I mentioned, is a really great friend who has really helped me along my entrepreneurial journey. So I'm excited to have her as one of my early guests on this podcast. Welcome, Bonnie.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. This is going to be fun.
Yes, it is. So, Bonnie, for people who haven't met you, can you talk a little bit about your entrepreneurship journey, how you came up with the idea of your business and maybe how you built it those first couple of years?
Yeah, I usually tell the story of the accidental entrepreneur, but like when I reflect back on it, I think it's very just sort of everyone's journey in many ways. Like, entrepreneurship, we're solving problems. We see a problem and we want to provide a solution, right? We're problem solvers by nature and as doctors naturally. And so I just found myself learning about personal finances because I didn't know, I knew very little. And then as I discussed it with my colleagues, it was clear that no one knew anything about money, which makes sense because it's not taught in school. I've been learning, especially with my 8-year-old, that like school doesn't teach a lot of life skills. It's kind of bizarre. And so as I talking more and more with everyone, it was just clear that this was a big gap. And I didn't have this idea like, oh, let me start a business to help people educate. I was just sort of doing that naturally. It's something I enjoyed. And it wasn't until a friend of mine was like, why don't you start a blog? And I remember thinking like, why would I do that? But then it made sense because I don't know, you probably know this. I have a background in tech. I worked in IT for a while. So tech has always been something very easy for me when it comes to building businesses. I know that can be a bottleneck for a lot of people when they're starting out. And so starting a blog was like a very low lift in terms of like actually getting it out there. And so I was like, okay, I'll do it. And mainly because people tend to ask the same questions over and over again. And so it's just much easier to link a blog post than to like type out this long answer. And again, at this point, this was more of a hobby. And I was making cute money, like $100 a month or something. I had sponsors. And so, but in terms of the decision to actually make it a real business versus like a little jobby, it really came down to just making a decision. I couldn't tell you like, well, this is why I decided to do it. Like, I think I just was like, well, why not? And it was fun. I was meeting really cool people like you, and it was just nice to be around cool people who are all building businesses. And again, like being a dermatologist, I was like, what's the worst that could happen? It doesn't work out and I'll just be a dermatologist.
Yeah, I think there's something so fun about creation. And I think as physicians, sometimes we don't get to create anymore, right? We're following kind of patterns. We know the diseases. Maybe there's once in a while, there's a zebra that's kind of exciting, but largely a lot of that creation and that growth maybe goes away over as we master our craft. And that, starting a business, I'm guessing for you was partially like kind of exciting to be able to create again.
Totally. And you're right. Like after you become an attending, after the first, they say 3 to 5 years, I think a lot of doctors do get a little bored, frankly, right? Because you kind of get into a rhythm. Obviously, depends on how you practice, et cetera. But yeah, it was really fun to learn something new. And I think that's just something all of us are naturally curious. We're really good at digesting large amounts of information. And so I really enjoyed learning. In fact, sometimes I think I enjoyed learning how to build a business more than actually the business in certain ways.
Yeah, that growth piece. So you started this business, I think, very early on in the physician entrepreneur space. Like a lot of physicians did not have businesses back then, and the online business space was really just starting, I think, to heat up. And so, can you talk about what it was like to build a business and then also be working and and balancing these two for people who maybe are starting out now and saying, like, how did she do this? How did she have a job, build a business? And then I know you had a child very early on in this journey too. So you were doing a lot.
Yeah, Jack was born like a few years before, so he was super little. You know, So number one is I worked 4 days a week, so that definitely helps. And I'm a dermatologist. I don't work nights or weekends. So there's definitely that. And I have obviously I had, childcare. It was when I first started out, it was actually like an amazing setup. Like where we lived, we were living in Philadelphia at the time. The daycare was literally across the street, and so was his pediatrician. Like it was just so nice. And then at the time, Matt was working, and his job was relatively flexible. He's not a physician, and so I think that flexibility and also having like really good help. My mom was relatively local, so I think and then at the time, I think I had like a mother's helper who would come in a few days a week to organize stuff. So I think that really helped. Like my mental load in terms of life logistics was relatively low at the time. I feel like it's a lot higher now, actually, ironically, as he's older. And so, and it's an online business, right? It wasn't like a brick and mortar. So I think I kind of just squeezed it in on the sides. And also, I really enjoyed it. So it didn't really feel like work to me. You know what I mean? So it wasn't like, oh, I got to put in 2 hours to work on my business. It was something I really enjoyed. So it wasn't hard to like, fit in. And it's hard to quantify like how much I was actually putting towards the business. I think it probably depends on the phase I was in. But I think depending on the type of business you're building, if it's primarily online, I think it's very doable, probably even in 10 hours a week when you're first starting. It just really depends. And then I think hiring someone sooner rather than later is important.
Yeah, it sounds like one of the things you offloaded, I want people to hear that you offloaded some of the day to day things, right? Because I think so many of us think about, oh, we got to go hire, we got to get a virtual assistant, which I think is really great for the business, definitely earlier on than maybe you expect to, but also offload some of those day to day things that maybe are not fun and drain you. And that frees up the space for you to build the business so that you have that ability to do both at the same time. Because certainly, as I talked about with Amy Porterfield recently, it's like it's nice to be able to build it on the side so you still have a source of income. You don't feel that stress of having to make the business work.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And, I think we're very lucky and privileged. I know not everyone in your audience are physicians, but I think having that flexibility where we don't need this business to feed our families, and also having the ability to you know, hire people to help out with things.
Mm-hmm. It's huge. Now, one of the things I think that really stands out about your business, about Wealthy Mom MD, is the design is so beautiful. The colors, the consistency, the branding. Now, you are a dermatologist, right? So you're quite aesthetic. But can you talk to people about some of the things you learned while you were building that design and the branding part of your business that maybe people wouldn't know if they're kind of just starting their businesses or earlier on in their businesses?
Yeah, I remember one of the first things I learned. So when I first started out, and I know we might touch on this later, but I just right away I decided I'm going to learn about business. And I see that a lot with early entrepreneurs is like they want to do it themselves or they can figure it out, and they can, but it's so much faster. And so I took Marie Forleo's B School like almost like right away, I want to say. I think I took it through Amy Porterfield. So I don't know how I found Amy Porterfield. It may have just been like an internet rabbit hole, and so I bought her email list building course. Anyway, so Marie Forleo, I remember one of the initial lessons was about positioning. And so she said, what is your business's positioning? Is it like Walmart? Is it Nordstrom? Is it high end? And so I think that's really important. And that might feel like, well, how do I answer that question with an online business? But I think it's a question worth answering. And so, of course, I was like, well, I want my branding to be, or like the feel of the company to be more high end. And so, because that kind of helps navigate like what your branding will look like, not just colors, but aesthetics and fonts and stuff like that. I actually would love to do a whole brand refresh, but that's down the line. So I did hire a professional, designer from the get-go. The good news is I think it's easier not to do that initially if you're really bootstrapping things, but I think it's well worth it because it really brings the brand cohesiveness together. And I do think visuals are important because people kind of remember the vibe of your brand. And I don't know, I think unless you have a good design eye, and I think I have a pretty good design eye, but even I feel like I have trouble if I'm trying to create something new aesthetically. Like there's just things I don't think of. So I had a designer, create everything. And then I also had another designer later on create a sub branding palette for one of my programs. And I had her create templates like for social media, for, slide deck. And I've tweaked them, but like having that like professional like base is so helpful because you
And,
can
and
spend hours on this.
and not that expensive too. I would mention, if I mean, you can of course work with people on Fiverr and stuff, but there are brand designers who you can work with that don't necessarily have to be thousands and thousands of dollars to work on your logos, to work on your colors, to work on your fonts, because those are really the primary ones. And then you're describing wanting to be kind of higher end in the beginning. I don't know if you use like archetype, brand archetype stuff, but for everyone listening, you can go online and look at brand archetypes. And I use that a lot to think about like, what was my archetype that I wanted to speak to that really reflected us? Because a lot of times these types of companies, they reflect who the owner is, right?
Yeah. No, totally. And well, ChatGPT wasn't around back then, but I think these days you could even use that. And in fact, I did use ChatGPT to help me create sort of a sub branding for the mastermind that I have. And so I fed it my current, palette and said, this is the direction I think I want to go. And I had it recommend colors, and it was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's so helpful for that, copywriting. Oh my God, we all, I imagine, use it pretty much every single day now. And that's such a cool way to be able to use it. And if it has a starting point, it's going to be able to come up with so much better options for you than if it's just starting with a blank canvas, for sure.
Yeah, I think that might be a good way to start. And even if you do hire a designer, you'll at least have thought about it a little bit. So, you could just tell them what colors you like, and then it'll, I don't know. I've never done it from scratch, so I don't know how it would be, but like, having a starting place. And again, I just told it sort of what I'm looking for. And, it still has pink in it, but I kind of made it more fuchsia, forward.
Cool. Yeah. And I created the name Biara using ChatGPT too. So there's so many opportunities when you're first starting out to use it as a thought partner, as a marketing head of marketing, or head of marketing brand and design for you. Now I wanted to talk about some of the things that you see where, maybe you had difficulties when you were first starting, or where you see people commonly get into trouble with business. Because I know you've worked with a lot of business owners as well as people with personal finance. So any sort of patterns you want to make people aware of that they should keep an eye out for as they're building their business.
Okay. So we're thinking like early in their business. I think not learning from other people who have done it before. Like, I just feel like you don't have time to figure stuff out. Even with ChatGPT, like, you're not going to know what questions to ask. And so I just feel like there's really no excuse for that. And there's all different price points for learning business. And so you'll just learn so much faster. You'll save so much time. And, I'm guessing your audience, they're all busy. Like, you don't have time to spend going down a ChatGPT rabbit hole and you don't even know what you need to know. So, there's that phrase, like, you don't know what you don't know. And so I think deciding to work with someone, and it may, you might have to ask people, whether it's a mastermind, a membership, there's so many ways. You could go to a conference and then meet people. I think it's also important to like make entrepreneur friends and, have friends who are, building businesses, whether they're sort of around where you are, or ideally you'd find people who are ahead of you, because, there's that phrase, success leaves clues. But I think that's really important, is to decide to learn. It's like, you don't need an MBA, but there's a reason why people go to business school, so.
Mm-hmm. And you and I have done a lot of education together, right? We've done online courses, we've done in-person stuff. We did a year-long mastermind recently together. It's been such a cool experience. Can you talk about investing in your own education? Because I think that's oftentimes something, especially as doctors, we are not used to. I mean, you would think we'd be used to it because we went through med school, but like in our brains, we're like, wait, I have to invest in coaching and it's $10,000 or I remember my first coach that I considered hiring was like $35,000. And it was like, oh my gosh, like that's so much. And I had never spent that kind of money. So I think that there's a point at where you're an early stage entrepreneur and you're looking at spending money on your own education. And there can be kind of a barrier there until you like make the decision. And then, once you open the floodgates, right? You and I are doing masterminds all the time. We're out there doing conferences and reading and stuff like that. But how do you kind of help people? Because I know you coach too on money, right? And this is money you're spending. How do you help people see or be able to make that decision that they should invest in themselves?
Yeah. So I think what I usually say is like sort of two things. One is they need to really think of it as an investment and that there's a return on investment. But then also, like, what is the cost of not doing that? Because people usually just see this, like you just said, 35K, and they're like, holy cow, 35K. But they have to understand that you're not just like spending 35K. You have to really think about the return on investment. And I think, a fun thing to do is just to think of it as I'm going to 10x my investment. Like, you better show up. And also, I think one that's really important is like, it is a collaborative relationship. Like, there is no coach or mastermind that can guarantee results because you have to do the work too. So I think that's just really important. And what is the cost of not doing it? Like, you waste a lot of time. You tend to move at a slower pace, because I think the quicker you make decisions, the quicker you actually do things. Like, that is the key to making progress in anything, really. And so, but I do get the first time, yet there could be sticker shock. And again, you're right. Like, on one hand, and we did invest, multiple six figures, although we didn't like pay for it ourselves, because even if our family paid for it, like, that wasn't our money, or there were loans involved. So we weren't involved in the actual transaction. So this feels a lot, but yeah, when you compare it to your medical education, like, it's kind of a drop in the bucket, to be honest.
Yeah, it's really getting over that mindset. And one thing you mentioned was having peers also along the way who are doing the similar thing, which oftentimes you get when you join those kind of programs. But we
Mhm.
were all lucky enough to find each other, right? Find each other. I guess now that I think about it, it was through educational programs that we kind of found each other, and then just connecting on the online space. Can you talk about like what kind of peers do you want to have in your life as you're building a business?
Yeah, so you definitely want friends doing business. To have people to talk to about it who get it, because otherwise, people who aren't in this world, like, they might think you're crazy, especially if
Mhm.
you have like quote unquote stable job, like being a physician. They'll be like, why would you do that? And so, and then sometimes, it's a different set of ups and downs as an entrepreneur. And so you really want that. And then you want people who are going to, be there for you and encourage you. And it can be lonely otherwise.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
And we're more
Um,
fun.
a lot more fun, a lot more fun, and
We're
then
more fun. We have a great attitude. Like, for the most part, we all have a growth mindset. And so, we're not sitting around complaining about stuff.
yeah, and we celebrate each other's wins, which I think is so valuable to be able to share a win with somebody who truly gets the magnitude of it because they understand what's behind it, but also who doesn't say like, "Oh, must be nice for you" or whatever that I think sometimes people could do on the
Mm.
outside world who don't really understand business and don't understand what it takes to be a business owner. Um, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about finances and
Mhm.
money mindset here.
Sure.
So, what would you say about money mindset and kind of some of the challenges people sometimes get into with that, and how can they overcome it?
So we're talking about, I mean, business specifically.
Yeah, or even life, because I think
Yeah.
the money and the finances, your personal money and finances, really bleed into your business a lot in the very beginning, and so um,
Yeah.
I think both are important.
So I think there's a few things. One is, you know, just kind of having some facts. Now, when I say facts, like, it's not like there's been studies on this, but I think a lot of people think they should be making money immediately. And that's just not how business went. Now, in online business, it can be different for sure. But I think just having this expectation that you should be profitable, wildly profitable day one is just, it's just not the norm. When you think of all the big companies out there, like how much capital they needed to start. Like, I heard Uber was just profitable the first time like 2 years ago or something like that. And it's
Mhm.
been around for more than 2 years. And so I think that's, one thing. Cause I think people, I don't know how this idea got started, but it's like, if you don't make a certain amount of money or a certain amount of profit, you failed in your first year. And that's just, I don't know, unrealistic. The second thing is, depending on the type of business you have, I think there can be a lot of discomfort in actually making money because, for the most part, whatever you do, physician or corporate, like, you're removed from the transaction of how you make money. And so I know not everyone that you work with does an online business, but a lot of them, I'm guessing, they're pretty intimate with the transaction, like, you have to like make an offer and ask ask them to pay you. And so I think that can be uncomfortable. Then people get weird about selling because they think they're just, you know what I mean? I think there's a lot of thoughts there. And so it's really important to get over that, obviously, if you want to have a business that makes money. And then this is less mindset, but I was saying earlier, you have to get business education. You have to get business finance education because, you could be great at making money, like top line, but if you don't know anything about how to manage your business money, you could be a business that makes a lot of money but makes zero profit, and you're not making any money from the business and spending all this time on it. And then when it comes to your personal finances, it just depends whether it needs to pay you initially or not. I think a lot of us start it on the side, so maybe not initially, but I'm guessing the goal eventually is for people to make it their main gig, or at least make it a substantial source of income. And so, you know, you have to learn business finances and personal finances and how to like manage the two, I guess.
Yeah. And how do you manage I know a lot of people carry baggage around money and, negative feelings about money. How would you suggest people kind of maybe reprogram their brains around
Yeah.
money if they have these kind of negative feelings about it?
I remember early on, and this was at I think it was actually Amy Porterfield's conference. I remember Stu McLaren saying the more money you make, the more impact that you can have. And I think this is so true. In fact, the other day, one of Jack's reading tutor, she charges very little compared to market rate. And I remember her saying like she just wants to make it accessible because it is on the higher side, and so not accessible to everybody. And that really I didn't have a conversation with her about it. I probably should, but it sounds good and well intentioned. But when you do charge more or make more, you can help more people, because if she charges market rate, but then because she's her own person, for example, she could have a sliding scale for people who maybe can't afford that rate, but that would be subsidized by the people paying their normal rate. So I think we're very limited, when we think we want to make things accessible. It just depends on the product, obviously. But if you really see money as not a great thing, you can see how it can impact things. And so, but the more money you make, you can have a much bigger impact, like, philanthropy, giving back. And, I have found that for example, physicians who open a cash only direct care practice, like they're able to be more involved with their communities because they have that flexibility, not just financially, but also time wise, because they're not seeing like 50 patients a day. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they're much more able to have, the ability to be with their families and stuff too, because they're not exhausted. They're not drained. They're not absolutely fried or burned out from the experience of giving everything at work too.
Yeah.
So it goes well beyond what you're able to contribute, like you're saying, financially, but also what you're able to contribute as a human being, which is far more valuable in some ways than the finances at all. Yeah, that's a really beautiful way, I think, of thinking about it. And so the encouragement here is to, charge market rate or above market rate, really know your worth and your value, and to understand that as you make money, it's not a negative thing, right? Money makes you more of who you are. It doesn't change who you are, and you have that opportunity to be able to give at a totally different level with that money. Bonnie, can you talk about challenge or a failure you've had? Because I think that's so important to normalize that, because we all have challenges and we all have failures, and maybe something that you learned from it that could be applicable to people who are building their businesses.
Yeah. So I'm glad you said that, because I think people see other people building businesses and think it's easy and that it's all success, but there's a lot of failures along the way. It's definitely a lot. It's not for the faint-hearted. It's a roller coaster. So it's like, which failure should I discuss? But the one that came to mind immediately is, you said earlier, like the floodgates open, like once you start investing in your education and having mentors, I think it's really easy to feel like someone else knows more than you do and someone knows what's best for your business. And I think that's really dangerous, because you always, at the end of the day, you're the CEO, like you're the person who's in charge of the business. No one knows your business more than other people. And so I think it's just really important not to lose yourself and think someone else, like to give your sort of like, a power is not quite the word, but kind of like all of your I can't think of the word.
Yeah, I think it's like this is a different terminology, but a lot of times we talk about, oh, somebody's going to come in and save us, right? So we abdicate rather than
Yes,
delegate,
abdicate. That's what I
right?
meant. Yeah,
Yeah,
right. You
and you can
abdicate.
abdicate, yeah,
You abdicate your I guess it is your power to somebody
your
else and think they
decision
know
making.
more. And then, the thing is no one knows everything. And so one thing that I had to learn, somewhat painfully is that every business mentor has wisdom from experience. There's no like right way to do business. So anyone who says this is the only way to make money is just, full of themselves. And so, but if they're saying something and I might not agree with it, first of all, that's fine. You don't have to agree with everything your mentor says, but I try to think about why would they say that? Like there's a reason why they say that. And so, but then ultimately you decide whether that feels right for your business. So I think it's, you're always the compass, you're the ultimate authority, and, just be careful of putting someone on a pedestal. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that's really great advice. And, take what's useful to you too, because
Exactly.
like you said, not everyone is always right about your business or business in general. And if something doesn't feel right with your intuition, or it's not to be right because of your specific people you're serving, right? Doctors, we serve doctors, and doctors are different than, the people that a lot of our business mentors are serving, and they do have unique characteristics. And so there are things that you as the business owner, you just know a lot better. And I have made that mistake of abdicating so many times and thinking somebody's going to save me, right? Like, I'll hire this individual, they're going to know everything.
I mean, that would be great.
Oh my God, it would be so great. But it's not the case. You hire that
Yeah.
individual and you find out, they don't understand your business as much as you do. And you do have to spend a lot of time training people, and don't abdicate decision making, because the decisions may not necessarily be the right ones for your business.
This is a
Awesome.
random thing, but I'm sure Sunny has told you, but like one of her mentors basically said she can't show up with showered hair. Look at me, I have just freshly showered hair, and because she doesn't dress up at all, and saying it was unprofessional, and she has to look nice, and it like there's a reason why she said that, and it makes sense. And I think Sunny was just like, no.
I know it's like stayed in all of our minds too, because I literally, had wet hair a little bit ago, and I was like, oh man, I'm going to show up with wet hair. Exactly the same thing. Thank you, Bonnie. And then for those who want to learn more about what you're doing and Wealthy Mom MD, where would you suggest they go? And how do they learn more about you?
Yeah, I think the best way is to follow me on Instagram. And so the handle is Wealthy Mom MD, all one word. And that's honestly everything. My website is called that. My podcast is called that. And if they go to my website, wealthymomd.com/book, BOOK, then they can get a free either PDF or, e-reader like Kindle copy of my book for free. Obviously, you can buy the paper version if that's more your thing, but you can get the e-version for free.
Thank you so much for giving everybody that link. And it was always, always, always fun to spend time with you and to talk about all of this. And it's all really important stuff. Money mindset holds people back. The psychology behind it, the fear of failure holds a lot of us back, and such normal pieces of what you go through as an entrepreneur, because entrepreneurship is about becoming a different version of yourself. It takes so much growth and so much discomfort, so much challenge. And so thank you for sharing some of your experiences with us today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.